Good morning. Yesterday was clearly a very difficult and challenging day for all of us across the islands. I mean, dealing with a 7.7 magnitude earthquake off our shores and the threat of a tsunami would have challenged any jurisdiction anywhere in the world. But I first just want to say that we were fortunate we didn't suffer any loss of life, and damage also thankfully is very, very low. I do want to pay a special tribute to Danny and her team and all our first responders and the law enforcement agencies for what I think was an outstanding response to a very difficult situation. I've been here over a year. I've been involved in some exercises, but it was the first time I've seen a real crisis in action, and I was impressed at how quickly our systems got to grips with what was happening and got messages out. So I think we should all be very grateful for that. We should also, I think, take credit for the fact that we got the islands up and running again very quickly. The port is open, the airport is open, we have 6 cruise liners here today. Water very quickly restored in some areas and checks going on. So we've done an awful lot very quickly to get back to normal. Often in these crises, keep calm and carry on is the mantra, and I saw a lot of that in action yesterday, and I think Caymanians and our citizens can be proud of that response. As always in these exercises, you have to evaluate how we did, look at the lessons learned. There were things we did very well. I'm sure there are things we could do differently or do better, and we will be doing that lessons learned exercise, and that should happen after every one of these crises. And my final point is just to say that I do think our crisis management plans are in very good shape. They were tested yesterday and have come out well, and there's more coming. I'm very excited about this new app that we have, which will allow people to download onto their phones and get information even more quickly and directly than we were able to yesterday. And of course we are setting up a new defence regiment for the Cayman Islands, and I think once that is in place, that will also give us another level of disaster preparedness. And the helicopter, I would just thank the crew on the helicopter who were up in the air after half an hour yesterday, again assessing damage and checking for tsunami. So I think there were a lot of positives yesterday, but I recognise it was a difficult day for everyone here and in the sister islands.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to endorse what the Governor has said, but also to say that this is an incredible jurisdiction. We didn't lose power. There's been no significant damage at all to any structures of which I'm aware. And although there was significant damage to some of the pipes, the Water Authority, they have worked like Trojans all through yesterday afternoon and all through last night to isolate where the leaks were and to have most of the island now back on water. I know I spent a lot of time trying to calm various people in my constituency and elsewhere, and provide the necessary assurances that it would be business as usual today. Because in a jurisdiction like ours, which is so reliant on financial services and tourism, business continuity is just absolutely critical. And I am really, really proud of the way that we have been able to respond and get things back to normal. Most of the schools are closed, but that is not really because of any identified damage, but out of a precautionary measure to ensure that the structures are all sound, and in some cases they didn't have water at the start of the day this morning. But I reckon by tomorrow all of the schools will be back and in business. There is a cautionary note though that I wish to sound. I've thought about how well we would be able to respond to this had this occurred at night. It would have been a very really different situation. And I think we need to do some evaluation and some assessment ourselves and determine how we would respond if that were to be the case. And the thing with earthquakes, unlike hurricanes, sometimes we have more than a week to prepare for a hurricane. This we don't know at all, and so you're flailing about, quite frankly, to think about how do we respond to this. What do we do? I know some people wondered why we didn't make public statements earlier than the governor and I did, but the truth of the matter is we had to have the necessary information. There is no point, in fact, that it is our duty to ensure that we don't distress people and we don't create panic by putting out statements when we don't have the necessary information. So in the case of an earthquake, you don't know it's happened or it's going to happen until it's actually happened in most instances, and that certainly was the case yesterday. But again, I want to pay tribute. I was there in the command center, seeing how the people from hazard management, Danny and her team, actually responded and how quickly they were able to get on to the information and to provide it to us and to help us make decisions about what should be said and done. And there are always lessons to be learned from these events, but I do share the governor's view that we are in a very good place in terms of managing hazards in these islands.
Thank you, Premier and Governor. And certainly, as the Minister responsible for Home Affairs, I was there with the Premier and the Governor and Hazard Management team and members of the other emergency responders in the command centre yesterday, right after the incident occurred, obviously. The mobilization was to be commended. I think that certainly, and I want to endorse what has been said before, we are truly, truly a very blessed country. I think it is a testament to so much that we've done and so much effort that has been put in over many years. Our building code, I think, is second to none. The fact that our buildings have withstood such a magnitude of an earthquake of such magnitude is a testament to that. Obviously, as the Premier said, that the commitment of the government as well as the statutory authorities and private sector agencies that pulled together to make sure that the country was as prepared as possible to deal with the aftermath. I want to thank the Red Cross for making their emergency centre available to the public here on Grand Cayman, and of course Aston Ruddy Centre was open in Cayman Brac for the residents of the sister islands. We have, as a government, continued to invest in finding solutions to anticipated problems, and as the Premier said, an earthquake and a sudden onset event such as that is certainly something that we could anticipate, but you never really know when and how it's going to hit or affect the country. So one of the things, obviously, that we've invested in starting from 2018 that we were actually able to test yesterday was the emergency notification system to interrupt, the radio broadcast interrupt. And as far as, reports that we've received from coming out of places like Canada and otherwise, international press that have covered this incident, were very complimentary and praised the efforts that their citizens on the ground experienced when they heard the radio interrupt, the frequent radio interrupts. So to the point that the Governor has said, this is an area that we invested in, we were able to test in a real incident, and going forward, the members of the team at Hazard Management and the other, Department of Public Safety and Communications and the other emergency responders will be looking to roll out the second phase of this emergency notification interrupt, and that is anticipated to be a mobile app. Danny can speak more to that when she gives more of a detailed overview, but certainly want to echo the thanks that both the Governor and the Premier has indicated to the team at Hazard Management, but all of the emergency responders, including the communications team who are here today, who worked, I know, tirelessly throughout the night to make sure the messages were delivered and also to ensure that the country was best prepared to be able to respond to what is now the aftermath of a earthquake. We do know the tsunami warning has been lifted, so we're very grateful for that. But into the wee hours of the morning, we experienced aftershocks. I personally felt the aftershock myself, and so we still need to be vigilant about the potential for aftershocks for some time yet. So again, want to thank everyone for listening in, and obviously those of you that are still on the ground making things happen to ensure that the country is back up and running in the most efficient way possible. Want to give thanks and pay homage to everyone in that regard.
Again, thank you everyone involved yesterday. It's been a real team effort over the last I guess, 12, 15, 20 hours, and that's a multi-agency response. So again, we did a partial activation yesterday of the National Emergency Operations Centre, based at Hazard Management as the operations team. The emergency support teams that we actually incorporated in there was the Joint Communication Services, and that's representative across. We have representatives from the Governor's Office, from the police services, from tourism, from hazard management. Again, making sure we're speaking with one voice is critical, and making sure that that information going out is from a reliable source, and we've had to obviously mitigate any false information going out, and that's always a bit of an issue in these kind of scenarios. I'd just like to give a very brief overview of the time frame that we did yesterday from an operational standpoint. At 2:10, the earthquake was felt. At 2:17, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center issued an alert, and that was at 7.3 magnitude. Now, obviously, we've seen the later alerts had identified as a 7.7 magnitude, but it was originally registered as a 7.3 magnitude. It wasn't two separate earthquakes, it was one. It was just a different measurement later on. Again, at 2:20, we managed to get our social media feed out, both our Instagram, our Facebook, and our websites. And again, 2:26, the tsunami advisory message came out. So whilst the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center advisory at 2:17 does relay the fact that it's an automated message that relays the fact that a tsunami is possible, that's not verified till later on, until 2:26. At 2:27, obviously the radio alerts were out, so we sent out about 9 radio alerts yesterday. The National Emergency Notification System Phase 1, as the Minister already talked about, again, is the use of the radio interrupt. And again, using 17 radio stations to broadcast that as an interrupt. We activated Joint Communication Services at 2:30, and at 2:48, given the space of where the magnitude epicenter was when we were expecting impact on Georgetown or Grand Cayman. The sister islands would have been before that. But again, it just goes to show the little time frame you have as members of the public to react to these kind of things, and we're really strongly encouraging the public to be aware. We will be potentially experiencing aftershocks for the next couple of weeks, so we've got to make sure everyone's vigilant and knows what to do if by chance we experience this again. We have a lot of information on our website to share with you, and again, we're very happy to talk more about that. The all clear was given at 2:49. We also released a statement at 3:49. We also released a statement at 3:04 saying it's very unlikely, but until we get the all clear from Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, obviously we want to make sure that we're on guard and ready to act. Throughout that, again, obviously the NEAC was partially activated. We had the damage assessment guys working with us, the Human Concerns Cluster, which is shelter management, getting activated. And again, we'd like to give a big shout out to the Red Cross because they've been activated and they'll close at 10 o'clock today, but we sincerely thank them for staying overnight and making sure they're ready to go. Again, a significant thanks goes to the Utilities Emergency Support Team. Again, the very fact that we've had Water Authority working throughout the night, making sure the water's back on, is a really good testament to their ability to act. And again, the utilities is run by the Water Authority, so that incorporates CUC, Cayman Water and so forth. So it's really important, again, that the utilities are back up to running this morning, not only for us to also have a hot shower, but also, the 6 cruise ships in town today, that again, without water, that poses significant issues. So we're very grateful to all the team. Again, anyone who activated at the National Emergency Operations Centre yesterday, we're very, very, very thankful to them. I'm going to pass over to Mr. Walton now, and we can carry on.
Yes, thank you very much. So, for us, obviously, we recognize the first hour or first 30 minutes of such an event of this magnitude and the chaos, as you can imagine, that would have unfolded in front of us. So we had to make some really fast time decisions, and really for us, the 3 key priorities were just simple preservation of life, maintaining public safety, and just looking at all the assessments of damage, and then how we were able to provide that collaboration and working with the HMCI in providing the message, ensuring that messages that were coming out of the center were being properly delivered to members of the public, and done so in a very measured way, because the last thing we wanted to do was to create further chaos. As you can imagine, the traffic chaos in the middle of, certainly in the Georgetown Center, was quite challenging. So as because of that, we had our entire traffic unit out with the inspector in charge, and as best as we could, try to clear the roads as best as we could. Priority for us as well was looking at the children, our most vulnerable, and ensuring that we were communicating with the schools in terms of what was happening, and checking on the schools as well as the prison. We weren't sure what was happening there at the time, so we had immediately had our patrol cars in the eastern districts go by the prison and looking at just in terms of security over there, but just ensure the security of everyone there. Obviously, things did not get any better when the information came from the center as far as a potential threat from a tsunami. That required careful managing. Thankfully, the helicopter was up shortly after the initial shock. I think we had it up within 10 minutes, which worked out really in our favor in the sense that we were able to have it over the island quickly doing some assessment, but then with the potential threat of a tsunami, we were able to deploy them some 5 miles offshore, and they were able to give us live commentary, and I was able to communicate that in with HMCI. Overall, the whole, it certainly tested our resources. And I want to certainly extend a big thank you to some officers who were off duty and were calling in, volunteering to come in, albeit it was difficult to get in at times because of the traffic situation. But we had officers coming in. In addition to that, officers who would have already been on and due to go off, we extended their stay into the middle of the night. And so as far as resources, we had quite a robust response as far as policing on the ground, just ensuring that law and order was maintained, and we could assess and assist the NRA with assessment of certainly the public roads, public thoroughfare, those areas where we were getting reports coming in of sinkholes, and we wanted to make sure from a public safety perspective that we were there to assess, and where we could provide cones to ensure that public safety was maintained. Overall, we worked through the night with it, and I can safely say that we had a fairly, despite all the aftershocks, we had a fairly quiet night and in terms of business continuity and maintaining law and order.
The floor is open for questions.
Good morning, this is for Danielle. We just had some readers who were curious about the actual measurements because it's quite a historically large earthquake for here. So do we have the actual measurements for Coleman itself, for the very first one anyway, the 7.7, because there was another one that appeared to be about 5 o'clock, but which was registered about 6.2, which said the Cayman Islands. So I just wondered whether we had anything for the history books, as it were, for the larger one and what it measured here.
I'm sure we will do. Again, we have it all monitored upstairs at Hazard Management. We can show the actual monitoring station. Just to video, there was actually 14 aftershocks. So one main earthquake and 14 aftershocks so far. Again, there is potential for more aftershocks over the next couple of weeks. So we do ask everyone to be vigilant and make sure that plans are in place. I think one of the issues with the traffic yesterday, again, we have this desperate desire to go to schools, pick up our children and so forth, and of course that's human nature, but we really need to try and avoid that at all costs, especially there's a tsunami warning there. We'll be doing a lot of work, but we have been doing work over the last year with the schools, talking about tsunamis and earthquakes and so forth. I think in September last year we did 2,200 schools in the students, that's a lot of schools, students in the space of 2 months. So we'll be doing more of that, in particular I think drills moving forward to make sure they are comfortable. But again, I think it's a really important thing for all families to have a plan, because the chances are you'll be feeling more aftershocks over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, Kevin, go.
Hey, morning everybody. Danielle, you talked about the radio interrupt. Just confirm for me that this is the first time that that's actually been used in a real life scenario, and can you tell me how many times it was interrupted and on how many stations?
Okay, so yes, you're right, indeed. We've been testing it every couple of months. We rolled it out about 6 months ago. We've been testing regularly through different means. I believe it's 16 stations. We are checking today on our records as to make sure that that's gone through each station. We do have a solid record here of the messages going out. So the first message of the alert itself went out 6 times, and then the other 2 with the sort of holding statement to make sure that, again, there's a tsunami advisory, went out twice, and then the other one was, I believe, once, the all clear. Again, we try to use other methods as well. Going back to the Minister's comment about phase 2, ironically enough, we were actually in a meeting yesterday when this happened with the procurement officer talking about the phase 2. And the phase 2, again, it's sponsored by the FCO, the Governor's Office, and it's it's an integrated approach, so it's talking SMS, social media and so forth. So it's a great app that people can download on their phone. Again, when this app should be coming out in April, May, but we strongly encourage everyone to download this app because, again, those notifications will come directly through that. It's one voice. We also strongly recommend, again, not sharing information that's not from a verifiable source. It's really critical for the response and to avoid panic across the Cayman Islands, that the information you're getting from is from the government, the www.caymanprepared.ky. And again, that's where the information should come from, and share it from there as opposed to any other sources you don't know are reliable.
And just as a follow-up, confirm for me what other aspects were involved in the emergency notification system. So aside from the radio interrupts, there would have been social media posts from hazard management.
Yeah.
There would have been CIGTV going on.
Yep.
What other things happened yesterday to help alert the public? Okay,
so we had the actual social media post and website update. Again, I think it was, make sure I get this time frame right, at 2:20 yesterday, so that was 10 minutes after the actual earthquake was felt, and that was between 2:20 and 2:23. We had all the Instagram, Facebook, and the website postings. We also did a press conference yesterday with everyone at the table here, and several interviews for CITV. And again, those went out throughout the day. I mean, I think the social media posts were carrying on throughout the day, and again, all the way on to the night. So we were also sharing posts about Red Cross shelters, about Water Authority, and every other thing. But again, just to make sure that public information was out there, and it is updated every 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on what the actual message was. Yeah, I mean, again, the website itself, it's a very good resource. We have all our earthquake information on there anyway to download, but it's a very, very good point of contact if you don't have social media, the website. And again, if you feel a very strong earthquake like we did yesterday, don't wait for notification. You need to make sure you evacuate vertically as much as possible, but also, again, have a family plan in place now for every eventuality, be it a fire. We had a fire already on Friday last week. That could have got worse. It didn't, fortunately. But again, family plans and work plans need to be very solid. Continuity of operations in a business needs to be very solid. So we're asking the public to make sure that they do have those plans in place if by chance we experience aftershocks or we have the same event in the future.
Good morning, everyone. You talked about no structural damage. We've seen a number of sinkholes popping up around the island as well as on our sister islands. Do you have a breakdown of how much sinkholes we have, the areas that the sinkholes appeared, and any possible cost for this damage?
Okay, so we do have a full breakdown of where the sinkholes have been identified so far. We have got our damage assessment teams out there on the ground now from planning, from NRA, and also private individuals helping with that damage assessment. Now that information is getting fed directly back into our hazard management office upstairs, so we can be monitoring it throughout live as soon as it gets entered in on the app. We don't have numbers again for financial yet. That will come, but again, we're working as part of the partial activation of the NEOC, the damage assessment. We also have economic continuity and other support teams that will actually help us identify that. Does that answer your question? Any other? Sorry.
So do you have a general area or anything that you can tell the public where to avoid if they have sinkholes? There were roadways that were also damaged during yesterday's event.
Yeah, I know the NRA have been working through it again very hard to fill those sinkholes on the land, on the actual roads. We're working with PWD to ensure that the public beach, for example, is filled. So they're quite random, spread out. Again, what we want to make sure, if by chance you see a sinkhole or severe damage to any infrastructure, or any damage to infrastructure, report it back to our Facebook pages or 911. We do need to map those. We're actually doing an exercise today, mapping everything that we've got so far on geographical map, so we can actually identify where the hotspots are. This is going to help in future again for certain hotspots, because again, the ones that we're identifying yesterday, a lot of them are historical data saying they're caves and so forth. So there is perhaps rationale while certain places are more likely to be sinkholes than others. But again, we're asking the public to avoid the areas and report in if they're seeing them.
There was no structural damage.
The preliminary assessments, the preliminary assessments say no. There's definitely sinkholes, but again, our damage assessment team are out now, so we'll be reporting that back in. As soon as they report back in with that information, we'll make sure that becomes aware to the public and also on our website and our social media pages.
April Cummings from Radio Command. Two quick questions. Just could you confirm for me when that first radio interrupt was? And before I forget the second question, we've been sort of trained to expect the National Weather Service to give us the Cayman version of whatever the warning, watch, etc. is. One thing we didn't get from you yesterday, or that I couldn't find quickly, was that there actually was a tsunami warning.
Okay, the tsunami warning came out from our radio interrupt. Again, and this is the documentary here. We've got all the actual the written narrative of that, and we can share that with you. That first one actually came out at 2:19 yesterday, judging by this data. So again, that should have interrupted all the radios. We're going to monitor today to make sure that actually did happen. We've heard it from a number of sources that they did come through, but
so there was information. It's just the actual words "tsunami warning" were the words that
there wasn't a tsunami warning; it was an advisory.
Gotcha. So again, that's important for us to start learning that language of how it's going to be communicated to the public, so we know what it means.
Absolutely, no, I completely agree with that. So the first question about Mr. John Tibbetts, the Weather Authority.
No, it was the same thing. We've over the years decided that our local confirmation, we don't just take what the Weather Service in the U.S. says. We take the ultimate confirmation is coming from our local source. So it's helpful for us to have that same process with you as well, because that is what people are looking for.
I completely agree. And again, the Weather Centre here are part of also the tsunami focal point as a hazard management. Again, in these kind of scenarios, we work very closely to verify with John, but at the same time, with that time frame, we just need to make sure those emergency notifications are out ASAP, because there is a tsunami potential.
Were there any areas of confusion in the official response, the things that we could learn from?
Yeah, I mean, again, right now the assessment is ongoing. We'll be doing a full debrief on Friday as to what lessons learnt. That's going to be coming in. I think, again, I feel very confident it was a very robust response, given that both the social media and the emergency notification radio interrupt came through within 9-10 minutes. I will reiterate what the Premier said. If this had happened in the evening, it would have been a different story. There's no way we could have activated in that time. It was very lucky we were all in the building at one time. So again, there will be lessons learned from this, I have no doubt. We're going to be working very closely with the police. We're going to be working with all our stakeholders and the National Emergency Operations Centre to make sure that this, our response continues to be as effective and responsive as possible.
This question is for Mr. Walton. You said that the police resources were strained yesterday with the chaos that ensued with the traffic. What's the situation today? Are your troops out and about managing traffic? I also noted last night during the police advisory that you were telling motorists to follow instructions. Were you having difficulty managing that traffic in terms of people following the instructions?
I probably wouldn't use the word strained, but certainly would use the word challenged. It certainly was a challenging period. As you can imagine, so I immediately went into town and assessed what was happening there, and pretty much every single intersection was just congested. The difficulty was getting the traffic out of Georgetown, so people who wanted to leave could leave, and that was just taking hours. The reality is that we have a really good team of officers. The traffic department were out in full force, and we had them at the major intersections as best as we could, trying to manage that situation. In addition, we were using other staff as well to provide support to our around traffic management. As far as this morning, we brought in officers again, a fairly sizable team again this morning at 7 o'clock, in addition to having officers remain on an extra few hours this morning who would have been on from overnight. We've already had our command meeting at 8 o'clock this morning, just discussing our resources and how that looks. And I'm fairly confident, based on the resources we have today, that we can manage that situation.
Actually, can I just interrupt very quickly, just to mention a bit more about the NEOC response. We worked very, very closely with the sister islands, so the district administrator in Cayman Brac, as well as Little Cayman and the clinical nurse over there. Their response over there was fantastic, and I have to give full respect to them. They had the teams out there doing damage assessments very early on. Aston Rutty Centre was open very early, and I think at one stage we counted 300 people in there, as well as having to evacuate the Faith Hospital. So again, full respect to the sister islands, because they did a great, tremendous job. We also had to deal with a bit of misinformation from there, and we had to verify it again to make sure before we send out certain alerts. We did receive an issue with a receding sea line. So again, just to make sure that our information is reliable, we need to cover those grounds, and we're working very closely with RCIPS to make sure we could identify that source and see if we could verify the information before it was released. Fortunately, it turned out not to be an issue, but again, it was just something we had to make sure that we're getting full facts on before we made any decisions.
Another question for you, Daniel. The situation with the Water Authority, that obviously improved after there was a little bit of confusion as to what they were doing, and then they sort of straightened that out, and they've been issuing alerts all day and been perfectly up to date on their social media. However, the private company, Cayman Water, hasn't, and all of us have agreed we weren't able to contact a single person at Cayman Water to find out what was actually happening to the water supply in West Bay. They put nothing out last night at all. So I know it's not government, so you don't control it. But do you have some kind of communication or partnership with them so that you can get them in the loop? Because it did seem to be
they're actually in the loop. Okay, so interesting you say that. Again, I haven't heard that to date, but we appreciate that comment. They form part of the Utilities Emergency Support Team. So under that, you have Cayman Water, you have Water Authority, who would lead the actual emergency support team. You have CUC and so forth, Home Gas. They've been reporting through the EST to the Water Authority as to updates, but they, again, maybe haven't been making them public enough, and we can actually address that.
I mean, as a resident of West Bay, we certainly didn't have any interruptions that I'm aware of in terms of significant downtime on any of our utilities. So that may be a reason why they didn't actually put out any formal notification. But certainly, as I said, I haven't heard anything from my constituents in that regard about interruption of water during this time.
And with respect to the Water Authority, there was absolutely no confusion with respect to the Water Authority. The confusion started because someone put out a piece of misinformation about the Water Authority shutting down its operations. That was not generated by Cayman Water Authority. It's one of the bits of mischief that you're constantly having to deal with. What happened subsequently, what happened actually was the Water Authority took a decision not to disconnect various people who had not paid. And they put that notification out. Subsequently, however, they started to lose pressure at the plant, which was a clear indication to them they had massive leaks somewhere. And so they tried for a while to avoid any cutoffs at all. People were getting low pressure in certain areas. And so they started a systematic shutdown of various areas to isolate where the actual leaks were. I was in contact with the director, trying to deal with some of the fallout from all of this. So I'm very well aware of what they've done, and they've done a massively good job over the course of the evening. They brought in all of their staff. They're still working to make sure that there is minimum a disruption as they possibly could. And I think most people this morning were able to have water for their showers. So again, I just want to commend them because I have a very good idea of how much work went on in very difficult circumstances all through the night, so that the public would have the convenience of water this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen of media, thank you so much for coming out. Unless there are any final burning questions?
Burning question. Very burning.
Last one.
Last one. Thank you. Is there any government agency that members of the public can contact for structural assessments, to check for damage, that kind of thing? Who do they talk to?
Again, I mean, a lot of this is going through Public Works Department and NRA. I think with structural damage, to get assessments, if they're private buildings, they need to be assessed privately. But public buildings, again, through the NEAC, will work with Public Works Department to make sure those are fit for purpose. The Planning Department are actually doing assessments today as well, so we'll try and combine all that. But to contact Hazard Management for now, and we can work through the NEAC to make sure the Public Works Department are dealing with that.
Thank you so much for coming out, and thank you for taking part.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're not clear yet.